receptors are called taste buds. And so we have 50 to 100 specialized epithelial cells with long microvilli that extend out through the pore in the taste bud to the environment of the mouth. And these are located in bumps on the tongue called papilla. And so here's an example of what we have as a taste bud. And so there are different types of papilla. We have fungiform, and these are going to have information travel to the facial nerve. The circumvallate, where these have information traveling to the glossopharyngeal nerve, and then foliate, which has information traveling to the glossopharyngeal nerve as well. So here, what we have is an example of a papilla, and so these are going to be lined with many different types of taste buds. All right, and so these, again, will be what are the receptors for different chemicals within our food and drink. Now, also, we do have some taste buds that are found within the epiglottis, and so these will transmit information to cranial nerve number 10. And so these will respond to chemicals like sucrose, sodium chloride, hydrochloric acid, quinine, which is found in a lot of meats, and then also with water. The circumvallate papilla, which are found here on the posterior surface of the tongue, also respond to different sugars, salts, acids, proteins, and then also we have tons of fungiform that are lined within the anterior side. And same thing, these will respond to different types of sugars, salts, acids, and then also proteins as well. Five different sensations of taste, we have salty, sour, sweet, umami, and bitter. So these are going to be, again, stimulated by specialized epithelial cells, where these cells will behave like neurons and will depolarize and produce action potentials. Cells will then release the neurotransmitter onto sensory neurons, where then the microvilli come into contact with these chemicals. Each taste bud has taste cells that are going to be sensitive to each category of those 5 different senses of taste. Another factor that will influence taste is temperature and texture of the substance as well. All right, so let's start going through what we have for our different senses of taste. And first, let's start with salty. And so here is salty, and the primary ion that we're looking at is sodium. All right, so sodium is going to enter into the taste cell, and then that's going to cause depolarization of that cell, where that will lead to voltage-gated calcium channels to come in, and then the calcium inside the cell then is going to release neurotransmitter. And then so that neurotransmitter is going to bind then on the postsynaptic cell and then stimulate a sensory neuron. Sour will respond to then with hydrogen ions. And so hydrogen is going to enter the cell. That will cause depolarization, activating voltage-gated calcium channels, so calcium will rush into the cell, and then it will release neurotransmitter, where the neurotransmitter will bind to the postsynaptic cell and then transmit that information on towards the brain. Sweet and umami are going to activate similar pathways, where they're going to bind to a second messenger system, which is going to be predominated by G-coupled proteins. So with these, either sugar or amino acids, typically glutamate, will bind to the receptor and then activate a G protein or a second messenger system. And so this will be a little bit different because it's going to close now potassium channels. And so the closing of potassium channels is also going to cause depolarization. And so depolarization then is going to activate neurotransmitter to be released and then stimulate that postsynaptic sensory neuron. Lastly, with bitter taste, we'll have quinine that is going to bind to the receptor, and just like with sweet umami, this is going to activate a G-coupled protein or second messenger system. The difference here, though, is this will stimulate release of calcium, which will cause depolarization, and the calcium then is going to release neurotransmitter, and then that information will be carried on further. So then the pathway for taste includes from those taste buds the sensory neurons. So we'll have the cranial nerves of the facial nerve, cranial nerve number 7, glossopharyngeal nerve, cranial nerve number 9, and then also vagus nerve, cranial nerve number 10, are all going to transmit that sensory information to the medulla oblongata. From the medulla, then that is going to travel up into the thalamus, and then from the thalamus, it's going to synapse on the primary gustatory cortex within the insular lobe of the brain, as well as with the somatosensory cortex of the parietal lobe. And then also we'll have a little bit of the synapsing within the prefrontal cortex of the frontal lobe, where that has to do with a lot of emotional states of our food as well.